Hey everyone, welcome to the Revillager podcast. This is Jasper Sircus, co-founder of Revillager, and I'm here today with Sarah Wildeman, or Wildeman. She's
Now
a
I'm
leader.
confused you.
Yeah, I like Wildeman. She is a leadership and team dynamics coach and facilitator, as well as the founder and CEO of Our Common, a coaching and consulting firm meets community hub. Our Common is dedicated to offering support and resources to leaders, teams, and individuals who believe in the importance of collaboration, community, and connection. She coaches, consults, and works with community seekers, community builders, new and existing communities, and values-driven businesses to help them thrive in their collective visions. Sarah's also been running a course on revillaging in neighborhoods and how to create deep community. At the heart of it, she feels we are not meant to do it alone, and is committed to reimagining how community can grow and prosper in our modern times. With nearly a decade's worth of intentional community living, Sarah is particularly drawn to building rich gathering spaces. She's been a longtime space holder for leaders and community builders as they carry the responsibility of serving others. So thanks for being here, Sarah. I really
Yeah, thanks
appreciate
for
it.
having me.
Yeah, we've gotten to touch base and connect a few times, and obviously on very similar paths in different ways. Actually, more so than most people, I think.
Yeah.
Obviously, our projects are, but then personally, we're also very much on very similar paths, and it's been really a delight to get to know you as much as I have, and just know that you're out there doing this work. And so I'm really excited to have you here to have this conversation and connect about revillaging and what it means today.
Yeah, ditto, Jasper. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
For sure. So my first question, based off my little intro there, where do you think the idea that we're meant to do it alone comes from?
We'll start with a zinger there. Where does it come from? It's so interesting. People like to point back to the root of things. I mean, it's maybe not a question I've asked myself that much, is just tuning in for yourself of where is that idea present in my life. And if folks are listening to this, just pausing for a moment and looking around their life and saying, where are the moments where the little voice says, like, you should just be able to do this, like, figure this out on your own, you shouldn't need help with this. Independence is maturity, adulting means being able to handle everything on your own. I think for every person, the story might infiltrate in different places. And for many folks, it might have been, some internalized story as a child where we needed help and it was dismissed, or, and we pick up this idea that strength is independence, or that being able to do things alone is what maturity looks like, or whatnot. I mean, of course, it's pervasive in our culture where so many things that are presented as success are about individual success, right? Climbing the ladder, earning personal income and investment and ownership, and those sorts of ideas that that's the water we're swimming in all of the time. So where did it originate? That's a deeper dive question. But is it part of your life? Is it a voice that shows up? And where does it show up? And does it show up as it relates to work, or relates to parenting, or emotional well-being, or tasks, life tasks? Like, where is it in your life specifically that little voice of, oh, you should be able to figure this out, shows up?
Totally. Well, I mean, that's a good point, that it's, often driven by these things we learn as children.
Yeah.
That we're taught, in a sense, from example, to be independent. And obviously there's a lot of merit and virtue into being resourceful and being self-responsible. In some ways, I feel like there's places in our culture and society where we're not, self-resourceful enough. We're too dependent.
Yeah.
But when I read that on the Our Common page, I was like, yeah, there's something there that's really deep. And obviously it's easy to kind of gloss over and point to, like, Western culture is hyper individualistic, and yeah, for sure. And that's going to permeate everything we do. and we're 3 to 4 generations removed from living very closely together in these tight knit communities, and now we've got this whole different system and context for how we survive in the world and how we thrive. But I really feel like a lot of people are looking to figure out how to not do it alone.
Yeah.
And especially COVID, the pandemic, it was like, wow, with everyone isolated, this is really showing how little connection we have with our local communities, because if you're dependent on line communities, like they can't go get you groceries, they can't check up on you. And there's a certain level of in-person connection we need for our nervous system. And yeah, I'm just curious, what do you think? Actually, I'll come back to that. Before that, I would love to hear, what's your story of revillaging?
Yeah, I'll try to give the Coles Notes, the bottom line version here, underscore it, and you can dip in and tease out any elements that catch your interest or think are relevant to your audience. But, my husband and I, when we were really young, he finished university. I was working in environmental consulting, and we just had like the world is your oyster kind of a season of life, and got given an opportunity to run an adventure leadership program in the Rockies, which just was what drew us into this alternative lifestyle that happened to be situated in what I would call an intentional community, where we were sharing meals, living together on land. And it was all the folks that were doing community together were working as part of this outdoor wilderness center in quite a remote location. And so I think we almost happened upon community living. It wasn't an intentional like seeking that out. And so we dove right into that. And one thing led to a next, that we became in a season where we were looking for the next thing. And we realized that had become a value that we'd cultivated in that time, and that we'd become parents in that context. And so we really recognized how much it had added to our life, how supported we had been through that threshold transition into parenthood by living in community and having so many of the practical needs tended to by the greater whole, and how much relational support and emotional support we were getting, living alongside other people in like quite an immersive way. And so when we were looking for the next season and where life would take us next, which we were looking closer to our families, we quite intentionally looked for what would this expression of community look like in a next season. And we happened upon another nonprofit that was organized in a very similar structure with folks living together on shared land. And so we had other options, but we chose that value of community actually above the value of career advancement, or at the time, maybe more income generation and other options, and chose, for the season and stage of life we were in, we knew that it really was priceless to be situated in a community context like that. And so we dove in and spent 5.5 years living in that community, which was a farm, an environmental nonprofit that was, doing environmental work and a CSA, community shared agriculture project, and environmental education, but also was a living community that did meals together and housed a guest house for people to come and go from. And then we came to a season where my very introverted husband needed to like reorient towards our nuclear family and to take a breather from living in such an intensive way alongside others. We were again doing meals together on a daily basis in that community for many years. In that context, we shared a home with what were rotating interns that were living in the community. And so we really were like deep dive immersed in community living. And what's 5 years ago now, we stepped out of that context and bought a home in a neighborhood in a small-ish town in British Columbia that carried some of the values we wanted in terms of like access to nature and outdoor adventure and work opportunities for my husband and proximity to schools and that sort of thing. And we plunked ourselves down here, and we've spent the last 5 years, two of which really were those intensive years more with COVID and people isolating more so. But we've spent the last 5 years here cultivating community and building village in our neighborhood. And I'm so happy to share whatever you want to know about what that looks like. But I would say, we've gotten to this place. It's taken time where it feels quite similar to what it felt like when we were living in these intentional community contexts, shared meals with neighbors, shared gardening with friends, relationships with people living right next door where my kids pop over and back, or, are keeping an eye out for them while I run out to the store, that sort of thing that is now kids running in and out of each other's houses up the block. That's here. We've built it here in this whole new context. And so revillaging, it's given me new fresh eyes to see and experience what community can be beyond the traditional model that we think of like buying land together and owning or sharing or living on land together. Even though I've done that too, this, it's feeling very similar. So that's the high level storyline. Happy for you to kind of pull out from any of that where you want this conversation to go.
Yeah, I love that a lot. I mean, two pieces really catch me. One is that you started your journey in parenting in a community, which is pretty amazing. I myself and a lot of people I know start searching for community when they become parents because they realize that it's really hard to do it yourself, in the nuclear family context, and it takes a village to raise a child. And so there's usually the, being with the child in the first few years, kind of losing your mind, especially if it's the first child, trying to figure out how to be a parent, and then just like yearning for other people, yearning for social contact, for other kids to be around, to play with your kid, for uncles and aunties and grandpas and grandmas and elders and all of that. And it usually takes quite a bit of time to find that, if they even do find it. It's not plentiful in our society to find that kind of connection anymore. So that's really special that you were able to start your journey there, and
Yeah, a thing I'm beyond grateful for. Sometimes I look at other parents and think, how do you do it? You're doing it all alone. Like, hats off to the parents that are finding their way through, because honestly, we felt so held and tended, throughout that whole process, right from the first, moment of getting pregnant, because we were living in community at the time with some other young families that were just like that far ahead of us on the journey, and had, resources to offer us, like physical, tangible, things to give us. I don't think we bought a single thing, that first year. So much advice not in the overbearing, overwhelming, but just like, oh, here's these people. I'm living with them. I'm watching them parent. I respect them. I don't need to get bogged down with like 30 different blogs about what I want to do about sleep. There's these people I trust, and I'm watching their kids, and I'm watching them, and I'm with them every day, and they're offering me this insight on how they did it. I could just trust that and roll with that. It's like that eldership, even though in this case they weren't that much older than us, there was that passing on of wisdom, and it was so easy to trust it and to just follow, and then, tweak and find our own version of things. But we really were saved in some ways from, I think, what becomes one of the greatest plagues of new parents is discerning, like, how do we do things, and how do we figure out the choices we make and the way we want to parent. And there's so many voices around those things. But when you are living in a context where you are really alongside and witnessing other parents, that integration of other ways of doing things becomes quite simple and easy. So, and then of course the practical fact that I didn't cook a single meal in the first year of parenting,
right,
was kind of miraculous when I think
yeah,
about it. And I don't think we took it for granted. Actually, we were really conscious of what a gift it was to be living in the context we were living in as new parents. And I want to point, you name this thing of like, once people become parents, they tap into that hunger, and then they start looking for it. And then it can take time to build. So, yes, that is so true. And I also think kids and parenting can be a great catalyst or an endpoint for building community in ways maybe that people don't find so easy without that. And I, not to say that it's the only way to build community, but I absolutely think landing in the place we are now in a neighborhood, so much of the community we've cultivated has been through our children. A, because they're friendly and they just make friends with everyone. But they're also out they want to ride their bike in front of the house. And so we're out in front of the house with them, or we're walking with them to school. And so then we're meeting the other families in the neighborhood that are walking to school. Or we're at the playground with them on Saturday, every Saturday. And so then we meet the other parents that are at the playground every Saturday. And suddenly, oh, we've seen each other 4 times. Let's swap numbers and let's do this more intentionally. So I think they also are a great in. So maybe for those that are listening that are like, I don't have a community yet. Wait, to just name that having, and if that's a journey that you're choosing to embark on, having kids, that I really think that can be a great support towards building community.
Yeah, and that's a great way of reframing it and flipping it because, for most of human history, community was not a choice. It was a necessity for survival. And now it's a choice. People can choose to live individually or to whatever degree of community they want. And it definitely feels like more of a necessity when you become a parent, so it is this catalyst of like, oh, wow, I actually need this more than I did before. So it definitely can be, for sure, a way to kind of really stoke the fire of that revillaging journey. And, talking to Indigenous elders and people from Indigenous cultures, children are always at the center, of the village and the future generations. That's the whole point of it. And so it's actually really beautiful for you to kind of make that comparison of, even in our culture, which is different, if you think about it, children still are the center of a lot of these communities because, like you say, we're meeting up at the playground, we're meeting up at the soccer field, like whatever it is, because children are, when you're a parent, they're everything. They're the driving force of life in a lot of ways. And you want to give them the best, environment you can, the best connections you can. So it becomes more of a automatic kind of process of creating community. The kids do it naturally, right? They're just like, hey, I want to be friends.
That's right. They give love so readily. Well, and one thing I want to highlight here too, because I think often when, we're listening to a conversation like this, we think, well, okay, great. So parents can make friends with other parents and then they have community. But what about those of us that have chosen not to have kids or can't have kids or whatever the storyline is for those that don't have children? And I just want to name, like, our kids have actually been this huge catalyst for community building with a number of singles who've chosen to live a life independent of ever having their own children, and yet actually have that hunger and that desire to maybe mentor or influence or have kids in their life because kids are delightful sometimes. And those have been some of the most reciprocal feeling community dynamics where, I think you're really winning in community when both individuals or both, groups or all groups involved are feeling like, man, I got the winning end of the stick here. Like I'm the one who's so lucky. And for us and for our family who've quite intentionally chosen to fold a number of singles into our kind of family dynamic, the dance, the life of our home, which has sometimes included having folks live with us. But a lot of the time, it's just like folding people into special dates and events and having them free flow in and out of our house or in and out of our lives in a very like natural, familial kind of way. It has provided some of that feeling of nuclear family to folks that have chosen to live or have a kind of single life, and yet they get to dip into this thing where they really feel a sense of belonging. They feel loved by and accepted and welcomed by my children. They feel needed. They get to offer this thing, and that's this beautiful, rich thing that they experience in their life through feeling welcomed in and not excluded from our nuclear family. And we get this incredible gift of having an extra adult set of hands and eyes and contribution in our home, even if that's just dipping in and out, like weaving in, for moments here and there. And then my kids get this incredible gift of having a whole other adult that's interested in them, that treats them with respect, that wants to know about who they are, that shares their stories and their wisdom and their perspective, which is usually different than ours. And so actually, when we look at something like that, we're all winning. and and again, the kids have been a catalyst or often at the center of what sparked that. So I just wanted to pull that in because I think, a lot of the more traditional examples are like moms groups or parent groups that met through the school, and then folks that are landing somewhere new might think, well, where do I find my people? If I can't go to a play group, that would be creepy. So yeah, just to say that's been such a gift for our family.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I've had a similar experience that having single people live in our house, just loving being in the family model. Really watching my kid. I have two kids now, but my older kid, because he's been in this context for a long time, watching how many secure attachments he has to adults is beautiful. It's like, because he's getting so much, like you say, it's like an ecosystem. He's getting so much from each adult. He's getting different worldviews. He's getting different skills. He's getting different types of personalities. And he's building trust in this wider network of people. Yeah. And, something I'm always fascinated by is like how secure attachment, ends up affecting how we are as adults. And obviously, like, I'm a big fan of Gabor Mate's work. It's like when you don't have secure attachment with any adults, because let's say your parents didn't have that with you for whatever reason, and there's trauma, and then there's no other adults around, you don't trust anybody. There's just this clarity of the world is not to be trusted. And so I love watching my friends who are in my son's life, for example, be with him, play with him, engage with him, but also teach him. Yeah. And when they get to a certain level, even discipline him. That's really exciting. That's when I know they're getting to like uncle or auntie status, is like they're actually like, don't do that. That's a bad idea. and yeah, and that to me is really what the village is all about. And I really see how much the adults get out of it as well. Like you said, they're getting so much. And that's something I'm like, I always joke to people about, of like, go help a family out for a couple hours. It means the world to those parents to have a few hours to just do their own thing. And then you get to be with a kid. And I think there's a lot of fear in our culture around being with kids, being responsible for kids, having to navigate that relationship. But it teaches us so much about how to be present and how to be caring and how to teach. All these things are so important. So I'm so into that ecosystem. And yeah, for sure. Just because you're not a parent, I think the ecosystem works better if there's not parents there.
Yeah.
They have different
diversity. Ecosystems thrive when there is diversity, right? Multi-generational, different, stages of life. Yeah. Different relationship styles or statuses. Like I absolutely agree with you in that. And, one of the things, speaking of early childhood and attachment, there is science and evidence that shows that like parenting relationship is such a core one in developing our attachment style as we go out into the world. And yet one of the things that it feels like an honor and a gift to have experienced is having had a number of singles live in our home over the years who maybe didn't have that growing up. They didn't grow up in a home environment where there was secure attachment or where there was healthy dialogue or conflict or where there was affirmation of worth and love and belonging. For them, not even just to receive that from us, although that's also a gift, of course, but to witness and to be sort of like on the inner circle in quite an intimate way, even just from the sidelines of watching a child be parented in such a way. Many people have spoken to us of how healing it has been for them, not just to feel welcomed into our home, but to actually get the experience of witnessing, like the child does a thing that they maybe would have been sent and isolated for, disciplined for in a way that cultivated whatever form of attachment they've developed for themselves, to then have a different imprint experience of maybe it's not their parent, but they're watching that parenting relationship and the gift that's been for them. And similarly, maybe watching our marriage dynamic, which that can be an intimate thing to have like witnessed, but also it holds us accountable to be in integrity with the ways we want to communicate with each other and the ways we want to navigate differences, or call it conflict if you like. But to then have, somebody's in the kitchen making tea and we're just like having that conversation that needs to be had. And again, the witnessing and having that reflected back to us as a healing experience for people to be immersed in a family dynamic that is absolutely not perfect, but working towards some of those core values and being in integrity and cultivating attachment, secure attachment in the home collectively. And so I'm grateful for that. I'm great. That was never a thing we like set out to do, to offer healing, but it's like, but I'm grateful that people have been able to receive that from those immersive experiences and to reflect it back to us, because it also is affirming as you do the hard work of parenting or relationship building within your nuclear family. So it's gift all around, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a beautiful feeling. I know that feeling. And I mean, I could talk about parenting all day, but I'm going to switch gears. But I did want to mention one thing, which is based off that, which is I had a friend reach out. He's a therapist and he's a really dear friend, and he has no partner, but knows he wants to have kids. And he called me. He's like, "Hey, like, I really like seeing you parent. Can I come live with you for a bit to really be and see and learn from you?" And he did. And I was like, that is the coolest thing that I never would have thought of. Like, it's like training before you get to the game or whatever. Like,
yeah,
like go find a parent that you think is doing it in a good way and go be with them for a bit. If you want to have kids, and it's like, it's so much you can learn and heal from your own, childhood. So yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So definitely, for anyone listening, if you don't have kids, go find some parents that you are excited about and go help them out. So I want to bring this to what you were sharing about your experience in your neighborhood over the last 5 years and building village in a neighborhood. I mean, that's really exciting for me because I've been traveling various types of communities and eco-villages for 15 years. The last 5 years I've been immersed in one and stewarding one, and it's on land and it's with people that co-live. However, I have lived in a lot of neighborhoods as well. And over all this time, especially with Revillager, I feel like I've really come to a personal conclusion that the future of revillaging is in neighborhoods. There's not enough land or financial capital for everybody to go buy their own little piece of land and figure out how to do that thing. It's a very privileged thing to do. And also it becomes kind of a bubble, there's definitely ways it can influence, and there's definitely a lot of merit in doing it and figuring out how to do it. But I feel like with what's happening in the world right now, the real beauty of bringing community to the level of village is going to happen in the urban and suburban areas and the neighborhoods. And so the fact that you're doing this work is super inspiring to me. And I know that this is what Our Common is a lot about. So I'd love for you to just share, your journey of what that village and neighborhood looks like, and what inspired you for Our Common and how that plays out in the world.
Yeah, thank you for that. I agree with you. I mean, not to say that eco-villaging and co-housing and all of those models aren't beautiful things, and I think they're part of a broader revillaging that is happening, and it's one way of doing things. And I think you're right. It often feels intangible, inaccessible, like there's a lot of barriers or time restraints to make that happen, or financial limitations to make that happen. And one of the most common things, so in my group program, Our Common Life, it's 6 months. The idea is like revillaging your life. And the people that come to it, I originally, when I crafted it, thought a lot of people that would come to it would be interested in like, how do I go and buy land and build a community and revillage that way? And then actually, mostly it has been people that have come that are saying, I either experienced community at some stage in my life and I've lost it and want to find it again, or I've never really had anything like that. And I'm tired of doing everything alone, or I can feel that I'm not supposed to do it all alone. Or pointing to our last conversation, a number of times, it's young parents who are saying, I don't want my kid to grow up with the only influences are like me and their teachers. I want to fold in other people to their life. And so then the exploration becomes, how do we build lived experience of community in our places where we already are without, and absolutely some people are visioning some future thing that may unfold. And for many, that may be the storyline, but actually what's the low hanging fruit is often the way I point people, like, what's right here, right now? It actually starts oftentimes with opening our eyes to, where am I already experiencing community that I could just like turn the volume up on a little bit. And it's interesting to me, in that course, how often, 1 month in, people are starting to say, oh my gosh, I'm seeing community everywhere in my life that I wasn't seeing it before. And it's a little bit like shopping for a car. As soon as you think you might buy a Toyota, you see a Toyota, like they're everywhere. And it's a similar thing where you start asking, well, what is community? What kind of community are you looking for? What does the village mean to you? What are the components of that? What needs would it meet? What would it look like? And then you start to look just even for like little moments, those conversations you might happen to have with another dog walker on your block, and you stop and you chat for 5 minutes. And, what if that interaction, which I might have just had happen and forget about, if I actually receive it as a moment of what it is, connection, and these are people that live near me and we have a common interest. We both have dogs and we're nearby and we're both two humans in the same place and we just interact with each other. And could I let that kind of fill my cup in some way? And then what would it look like to just take that up a notch? Is it, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's walking my dog more often in the neighborhood and seeing who I see regularly. And then maybe there's a connection with one person. And then it's asking them if they want to meet up at the dog park. And it's like letting things build. But oftentimes it starts with just like, what are the easy, low lift options? And I often start there because people are maxed in our culture. We live in these, in economic conditions where people feel busy, for lack of a better term, maxed in terms of their capacity, time, energy. And so if you can look in your life of like what's already there and how can I just, lean into it a little more or claim more of it, that's a really great low lift place to start. And for me, that's the earliest and easiest expression of that was when we moved into this house. The first week we were in the house, we took down the front fence. So there was a front yard and there was a chain link fence. And we took down the fence. And I think it was about a month in, we got ourselves organized and we built a patio in the front of our house. We planted garden around it, but we intentionally left it open enough that we could still see the street. So rather than creating like shrubs and garden that would close our home in and kind of block it off from the street, we left it intentionally like open enough. And then we sit out there. It's as simple as that. We sit out there. And sometimes we need alone time and we don't want to meet the neighbors or chat to whoever's walking by. And then we sit in the backyard. But we quite intentionally, and I myself very intentionally, sit out front often. And we did that from the very beginning of when we moved here. And just by making ourselves present to the neighborhood, within the first 6 months of being here, I knew almost everyone on the block by name. And I think there are people that have lived where they live for a decade and don't know the neighbors on their block by name, But it was about presence. It was about presence. It was low lift, drinking my coffee in the front yard instead of the backyard, or in the front yard instead of in my kitchen, and that availability and then frequency starts to feed connection. And I mean, there's so much more I could say about that, but I'm conscious of the fact that I'm carrying on. So maybe direct me, Jasper, if there's specific questions that feel they would be helpful.
I would love to know what your course has been about so far. I know you're talking about the low hanging fruit, but I'm curious, for people who are like, oh, I would love a course that helped me revillage my neighborhood. Like, what is the process and what are kind of the nuances of revillaging in a neighborhood?
Yeah, brilliant. It's so interesting. Again, you set out to do a thing. I'm sure you've experienced this with Revillager, where you're like, set out to do a thing and you think you know what it's for and who it's for. And then the people come and the questions they have, and it starts to evolve in its own way and shape and form. So I, again, thought it would be like all full of these tangible, practical tools. And there is that absolutely, frameworks, in particular around communication skills or conflict navigation or relationship design. How do I balance my needs and someone else's needs? Like those sorts of things. But ultimately, the foundational parts of building community, it comes back to secure attachment, like we were talking about before. It comes back to, the questions people bring, which I thought would be quite practical in nature, are often like, how do I, like, wait, you're suggesting I just like ask my neighbor over to come over for a drink? Like, what if they say no and then it's awkward forevermore? It's like, oh, okay. Inside that question is not actually a practical question. What's in there are these questions about vulnerability and our worth and sense of belonging and fear of rejection, or like, what if I grow really attached and we build this little community and then people move away? How will I handle that? That will break my heart. It's like, so it's interesting. It really has become, and because the work I do as a coach also has, a lot of therapeutic and trauma informed qualities to it, we're able to hybridize the conversation both about those like case study practical things. What do I do about this interaction with my neighbor and their kids, and we have totally different parenting styles, or that crotchety neighbor down the block that keeps getting angry at me and I'm trying to be friendly with them, but they're, so we can have those practical conversations and talk about skills and tools, but also we're diving into that underlayer of like, what are the deeper fears that hold us back, or what are the comforts that feel like we're, maybe for lack of a better word, addicted to, or that feel like they keep us stuck into a storyline that we know isn't working for us, but that feels hard to separate ourselves from or disentangle ourselves from. I mean, broad strokes, the process, we really start with remembering. And that's both a personal remembering of where we experienced community and village in our own lives, but it's also, you and I were talking before this conversation about ancestry. It's like an ancestral remembering, like a tuning in to what does my like body and my humanness know and remember about more integrated and interdependent ways of living. So we start with remembering before we move into some visioning and dreaming into. And so as we ideate, we also develop a bit, everyone kind of picks a bit of a project or like something they could be working on. Sometimes it's a collection of practices, but in a lot of cases, it's folks are, oh, I'm going to try to start a potluck group while I'm in this course, so that they have something to be working the muscle of like invitation, because we talk about how do we craft an invitation, and and then they can come back and say, okay, I tried that and it was really awkward, or this didn't work, or this was confusing, or our group got together and then we tried to make a decision and that was tricky, and so we've got a call that's about shared decision making and navigating conflict. Or so we're looking, it's again a hybrid of bringing in those skills of really like relationship skills, relationship building skills, but because people are working their personal case studies, and out there doing the work in their lives and in their neighborhoods and in their communities, then we're able to bring in particular examples and kind of work them together to find solutions. So yeah, I mean, the hope is, and the experience has been so far, this is my second time running it through, that people by the end are looking at their lives and saying, oh yeah, there's this element of community that wasn't there before, and I'm meeting this need, this relational need, in a way that I wasn't before. And some of that it looks very individual, depending on where people are coming from and what the particular needs that they have are. Yeah.
Well, that's so cool. I I dig that so much. I think it'd be so useful for so many people. I mean, because you learn the hard way often, when you just throw yourselves into things. And something that stuck out there for me was how you think it's about these external practicalities, and these systems, and those come into play at some point, but there is so much inner work. There's
Yeah.
like the revillaging yourself aspect. And what I've in my travels going to all these communities, like most of them are struggling. And there's lots of, things you could point to for why that is. It's a hard endeavor. However, what I've noticed, and in my own community as well, is that a lot of people want the external feeling of the community and the rewards and the experience, but they throw themselves in before they've done the work to actually know what community is inside themselves.
Mm.
And it can be very jarring, especially if you were raised in a nuclear family and you've been individualistic your whole life, and then suddenly you're living with people and it's like, yes, we have it all externally, but suddenly you're like, oh, I feel upset about this thing that someone said. What do I do about that? You never learned, and there's these little things that you just never picked up along the way. And now you have to deal with all of them at once, right in your face all the time.
Yeah.
And it's too much. It's too intense. And a lot of people burn out or leave or whatever. The community can fall apart in those scenarios. And so what you're doing is really a really important growth, mindset way of coming into community, going with first of all, the digestible parts, which can feel like when you exercise at a gym and you haven't done it for a while, it feels not great to be doing the little weights, but it's like, that's actually how you get strong.
Yeah.
It's so much more important, and the longevity of it is so much greater when you can actually create that growth slowly, as nature does with plants and such. It's like really taking the time and then starting with yourself. And that's one thing that's kind of paradoxical, is you think, okay, community is about connecting with everybody else, but actually it kind of does start with the individual. You really have to feel yourself in order to be able to connect with others, and that'll be a feedback loop, and you'll be going back and forth forever. But what you're sharing in your course is like, yeah, being able to learn how to do an invitation, how to deal with rejection, how to approach someone that you don't feel super comfortable with. Like, these are small things that make a huge difference in the journey of community building, that are often kind of swept under, because it's like, oh no, community building is like, yeah, like making a festival, or like
Right.
making an eco village, and it's like, no, there is a process to get there, even if you don't even have to get there. But just, yeah, that level of being able to connect in a more gentle way, especially with a neighborhood where there are lots of different types of people coming from different walks of life. And yeah, I wondered, like, what are the themes that you've seen? You spoke to a few of them, but like, what are the themes you've seen of, like, what are the things you find that really can kind of bring a bunch of people from different walks of life into one spot? And I know potlucks, you mentioned, that's a great one. Just inviting people for food, like, that's time immemorial, eternal human thing to do, is come around food. I wonder, like, gardening, like having a community garden might be another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious about those.
Yeah, gosh, while you were talking, my mind went 1,000 different places. One I just want to name real quick was
Yeah, please.
pointing back at the very beginning. You said this of our conversation. You said this thing about when we were talking about not doing things alone, but you were talking about there are some places where we need like more personal ownership. And what you're pointing to here is, I think, in community and in relationship in general, which really community, if you're like, where do I work that muscle? I don't have a big community. I'm like, do you have parents? Do you have siblings? Do you have a neighbor? Do you have a partner? Do you have children? These are all people you can work the exact same skills with, because it's just relationship. We're just talking about, and if you think those relationships are complicated, then times it by 20, and now we're doing community. And yeah, it's hard work. And it's the same skills across the board that we need to be working the muscle on. And that's this whole thing of like, personal work is global work or is relational work. Like when we're doing and vice versa, because I don't think you need to heal yourself and find an internal sense of belonging or know how to do community inside yourself before you're allowed to go and do it out in the world. It's actually, like you said, this unfolding process where we go and do relationship and then, oh, I hit up against this discomfort in myself. And what is that? And what was that story about my worth? And how do I kind of tend to that and nurture that and maybe reparent that in some way? And then, okay, now I'm going back out and making repair in relationship, and it's self building, as internal work, relational work. They go parallel to each other, or they're complementary to each other. So I just wanted to underscore that, because I think that's really important. And I think a lot of people that are longing for something in particular, some sense of belonging, they are like, oh, I'll find community and then that will fulfill it. And then they get into community and they're like, dang, this is really hard and it's not uncomfortable. And those people aren't doing the things I want, or they want to do things differently, or they're so annoying, because people are annoying when you're with them all the time. That's just true and normal. So be prepared for that. And oh, that's actually like, how do I be with the discomfort of the fact that those people are annoying to me right now? And what's actually mine to own there? And so I just really want to affirm and encourage, like, that this journey isn't one of outsourcing the work to finding a community. It's actually still an internal journey of like doing personal work and growth and maturation alongside each other and helping each other through that. So yes, then to your question of like, where do we find the people? Is that the question? Kind of like, how do we gather people together if we're not just like on shared land and living together? And I think probably the two easiest ways, one is find a common interest, and the other is location or proximity. So one might be like a bit of a broader or wider circle. You might look, and you mentioned earlier, like, oh, I want to be in a place where I can just like find a dance group that's happening, and I want to be able to just go and join it. So some of it really is, what are my common interests, and not just like things that I like, but things that also speak or resonate with my values. So one of the first things we did, we do a permaculture design garden on our property, and my husband has his PDC, his permaculture design certificate. And that permaculture for us is an expression of some of our values. And we tend to find like-minded folks share a similar interest in it, or just in general, like growing food or growing our own herbs and medicines and food and ecosystem values. And so we did a Google search when we moved to Vernon. We were like, permaculture Vernon, and we found like a permaculture farm. And then we found out that there's a permaculture group that meets at the library. And so we joined that group, and there's a Facebook group. So we joined the Facebook group. So we just like, what's our common interest? And are those people within an hour's drive of where I live? And where are they already gathering? So actually, again, low lift. You don't have to be in charge of all the things. Be responsible for all the things. So it might be different for you. For me, it's it's gardening, but we also, I looked for like, again, had a little one at home when we first moved here. And so I found like a mom's hiking group, and I Facebook group Googled it, like Vernon hiking moms. And oh, look at that. There's already a group I can join, and they meet on Thursday mornings, and I'll just go to the group. So common interest, I think, is a really easy one, that often there's like already something in your region or area centered around all kind. Now I've built a huge community around trail running here. And then same thing, you meet, oh, this person's in my neighborhood, and oh, they happen to run in the same park that I run in. So let's meet up. And that can help facilitate those relationships. And then the other is, it's a little less guaranteed to be quote unquote your people, or the people you think that you would want to do community with, but it's actually with like, who's right there, who's in your place, who's in your apartment building. If you're renting a basement suite, who lives upstairs? Who lives next door? For us, it's the neighborhood, who lives on the block, who lives in a perimeter of a few blocks radius. And then again, making yourself present connecting in places that are local to you, a local coffee shop, a local park, walking in the local trails, walking in your neighborhood, maybe without headphones or a phone call happening, so that you could chat to the people you bump into. And then I think, I think most people start with those low touch, easy engagements before initiating the next level. I'm a bit of a deep diver, and I tend to go straight for the like invitation and then see where things go, which I think has served a lot of, has been a catalyst to the development of a lot of things for me. Where I meet someone, I'm like, oh, we connect so easily. Like, let's do this again. And I'll pick something soon. Do you want to come over on Friday for, coffee in the yard, and we'll carry on this conversation? So just like I made a friend at the local skincare shop last week. We went for a walk together, and now we're friends, and, she might work with me. And there's, it's just like, if you meet someone and they're resident, making those invitations and letting things build from there. So who's in your place and who shares your interests, I think, are kind of the two easiest places to start, with the anticipation that it's actually easier to connect with the people who are in your place in terms of schedule and structure of your life, because proximity creates ease. Frequency creates ease, proximity and frequency. And that they may not be the first people you would have chosen. And yet, like, oftentimes become surprisingly beautiful relationships. And I think that a lot about people that I see most are people that live nearby, that I think, like, if we didn't live nearby, we maybe wouldn't be friends. But because they're right next door, I end up chatting to them every other day. And now we are in each other's lives in meaningful ways. And that in itself is a gift, because you build a more diverse ecosystem than you would have if you just looked for, like, who are my people, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Totally. No, I appreciate that. That's a really simplified version of, the two main ways to engage. And both of them brought up things for me. One was just a personal remembrance that I've thought of for a while, which is that I grew up in a neighborhood, and it very much was just like a street, lots of kids. I could run around. It was great. It was a little community. And I befriended an old man just 3 doors down, and he was like my grandpa. He was just this, doing his own thing, and he taught me chess, and I used to go, and when I was really upset, actually, I'd go be with him sometimes. And like, that's just one of those things, like, you don't go looking for that, but it's there. It's like often right around you. You don't realize, like, right under your nose. And the other piece of that was back in the day, it felt like there were always block parties.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know who organized it when I was a kid. I was just, suddenly everyone is together in the street having a barbecue. And I was like, this is awesome. This is so cool. And I don't know, my experience living in Vancouver, in the city, I didn't really see them very often. Every so often, certain spots where I could see there's more community action going on, for sure. But a lot of the neighborhoods, I feel like, I was like, did we lose the art of the block party? Like, that's a great, like, just little catalyst for your neighborhood being together, getting to know each other. So that kind of feeling of like connecting with the people around you, I think, is really important. And I've noticed it does bring up a lot of anxiety for people these days.
Yeah.
The thought of actually like going and talking to their neighbor, or, making those invitations. So I totally understand what you're speaking of, as like needing to regain the ability to be vulnerable, putting yourself out there, making those invitations. Like, I can definitely see how that in itself is a learning curve. And then on the other end of the spectrum, with finding like-minded people, we have these insanely powerful tools like the internet, Google, Facebook. And like, I have plenty of things I can say against Facebook, but one thing I'll say for Facebook is finding like-minded groups. It's incredible. You can find anything, and a lot of it is online based, but a lot of it is local based. Yeah. And it's amazing. And to me, that's the tool that I feel like could be used so much better for, we use it to find each other, and then we meet up in person. Yeah. And that's really the juice of it. And we're just using the tool to find each other, or communicate when we're not in person. And you were sharing like finding, like-minded people and creating community, or just plugging into a community, because often those communities already exist. And I like what you're saying before about how like you just start seeing that communities are everywhere.
Yeah.
Even go to a community center, there's people that are getting together for basketball, people that are getting together for crocheting and learning languages and all of that. So I guess I'm curious, this is maybe my last big question. We'll try and distill a lot of this, is these two polarities of like trying to create connection with those around you who may not share your interests, which is really important for us because we need to be influenced and not be in an echo chamber. And then the other side of it being like just connecting with people that are like-minded. And for a lot of people right now, that's only on the internet.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily ever see those people. But like finding the middle ground and creating, I guess what I would call, because you were saying like going deep, like what would be the next level once
Mm.
the community is like starting to hang out, everyone knows each other enough, maybe they're getting together for potlucks or gardening or whatever it is, like what do you see as the next level? There doesn't have to be one, but like finding the next level of village
Yeah.
in our modern times, which again is internet, it's being vulnerable, it's all of these things. So
Yeah. What I want to offer there is that it's a both and. And
mm,
I think my experience when I lived in intentional, so I developed this tool that you can get for free on my website. It's called a relationship ecosystem map. And the idea is that you map out or identify a whole bunch of needs in your life, or values, or things that you're longing for in your life. And then you just kind of map out like who in my life is, or which groups are helping to meet that need. So it could be like a social need, like it's light touch, it's fun, it's chit chat. Not everyone has that, honoring the introverts of the world, but some of us do. So there might be that need, and then there might be the like really deep witnessing. I feel seen and known and like loved and really like cared for emotionally. There might be that need, or there might be practical needs, like we're in each other's lives and we can swap childcare, or we could like help each other cook or help each other move or lend each other a truck. Like there might be a practical need, or there might be a spiritual, like I'm longing for like a connection in a spiritual need. Or so we have all these different needs, and then kind of mapping out like who in my life or which groups in my life help to kind of fill that gap, or fill that niche in my ecosystem. And when I lived in intentional community, I basically would have taken my community and like plunked it into every single one of those categories. It was all the things in one place. And that was beautiful. It was a beautiful expression of community and experience of community. It was very disorienting when we left, because all of a sudden all the niches in my ecosystem were empty. It's like, they would all been filled in this one place and by the same group of people in various, configurations. And now I recently did this exercise with my group, and I was doing my map, and I was like, like all my needs are being met, but it's like, oh, my potluck group fits into these core spaces, but actually these neighbors fit into these things. And those friends that I garden with, they fit in over here. And this other group that I meet with online, still, they fill this other need. And actually now there's more, again, different relationships that are filling those niches, those needs in my broader personal kind of life ecosystem. And so I think depth often is, it is going to look different for different people. And what does that mean for us? And is that about being witnessed? And it is about getting curious, like, oh, is my running group the space where I'm really going to be known and seen and witnessed? Maybe, like, and maybe that's what I want to cultivate there. And I might be intentional to be vulnerable or to share personal things while we're out for runs, or to ask deep questions. But maybe not. Like maybe I recognize that fulfills like a shared interest need. And that group of, women that I have group of women that I circle with once a month, maybe that's the place where is really fulfilling that need of feeling really seen and known. Oh, and also this group I'm online with, and also my nuclear family, and also these 3 or 4 friends that are in my neighborhood, or, you know, and so actually taking the time to ask yourself, oh, what is the purpose of this group or this friendship or this, gathering, and what needs am I hoping it will meet, and what need, like, and if I want it to meet a really deep need around emotional connection, what do I need to design in or do or bring to cultivate that here? Because I think sometimes we put expectations on relationships that don't have the inherent design to hold that expectation. And when we can right size, for lack of a better word, the expectations we're holding for different relationships and allow them to fulfill the need they're really equipped to fill, then we can feel quite satisfied in a variety of different types of relationships. So for me, school pickup is like one of my favorite times of day. I do not expect to feel known or seen or deeply witnessed or held there. It purely feels like a light touch social, and like I like to feel connected to what's going on at my kids' school. And I'm very clear about what that little moment in my day is for and what those relationships are for. And that doesn't mean I'm closed to the possibility that they could or we could unfold depth there. But I'm actually not trying to do that in that space, because I've been trying to cultivate that with my potluck group and with my women's circle and with those couple friends in my neighborhood. So again, that tool is free, so feel free to grab that, and because it points you towards some of those questions about like what are the purpose of these different relationships and how can I kind of cultivate those right sized, again, expectations around them. So I mean, I think, yeah, lots of ways that we can layer in depth: shared work, shared play, shared ritual, shared vulnerability, shared purpose are all things that bring in depth, but just also permission that not every niche in your ecosystem needs to meet the depth need, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that answer. I wouldn't have expected that answer. That's a great way of understanding it. And it like hit me in a few ways. The beginning of Revillager for me was about trying to understand that need of different needs and how we can all fulfill in each other's lives, and how to find that in the world. And so yeah, that is huge, and I'm definitely going to check out your work on that. And yeah, it is really interesting how we try so hard to get certain people to fill so many different
Yeah.
niches and needs in our lives. Even obviously our romantic partner is usually the one that
Yeah.
gets the brunt of it.
Yeah.
But then even in our friends, and that's something I've had to acknowledge, it's like some of my friends are not going to be going deep in shadow work with me.
Yeah.
They just don't want to. Why am I going to push them to? So yeah, creating that network and that kind of mycelial web of relationship, and
Yes.
finding out where, okay, this one spot in my needs is not being filled. Where do I find that?
Yeah.
And on the practical level, it's like really cool. If you think about a neighborhood, it's like, who has the tools?
Yeah.
Who knows how to do the garden? Like there's skill sharing, and there's tool sharing, and there's all these ways in which we can resource each other on a practical level, which then necessitates that we talk to each other.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And for the record, that is not so scary as we think it is. We always, it starts with offering, it starts with asking. Those,
Uh-huh.
offer or
Uh-huh.
ask, one or the other, whichever you need. You might weird some people out, but probably the world won't burn down when you ask or when you offer. So, and that's another great pointing place to how we cultivate, that village aspect. And I would call that one of the needs. It's like in the ecosystem, that practical support is like
Uh-huh.
one need. And actually, it's most likely to be filled by your local community. But maybe that local community doesn't fulfill some of those other needs. And you might fill in or infill again with that local interest group, or even that online group, or an intimate partnership, or nuclear family, or a smaller group, or whatnot. So yeah, so much we could say there, but
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, I love that is to me the kind of harmonic fusion of these different worlds that we're in and we're trying to cultivate at the same time. And it can get difficult or discombobulating, but at the same time, if we are just very aware of what our needs are and what our social ecosystem is, how much capacity we have, then I think it's actually very doable and amazing that we can hop on a call and talk to people from around the world and do very specific things that we ourselves need that no one in our neighborhood could do.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful, opportunity and time to be alive, to be able to create this kind of new, a new version of village. I mean, that's what I'm really curious about, constantly wondering, and this conversation's been really beautiful and unfolding. That is like, what does village actually mean today, and
Yeah.
for us, and how do we harness all of the pieces of existence right now to find that need of community in ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I could chat for a long time, but I really appreciate this conversation, and hopefully we'll have more. And yeah, please go check out Sarah's work, our-common.com. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. Our meaning our collective, or what we have in common, not the timestamp.
Right, right. Oh, you are. Dash common. And then your Instagram is our_common. Is that correct?
Our double underscore. It's underscore common.
Okay, awesome.
Somebody else had it.
Yeah, we'll link it under the podcast, but yeah, go check it out. And of course, Our Common Life. And I'm excited to hear how it unfolds continuing. And yeah, really appreciate your wisdom and all this. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Jasper. It's easy to converse when we have so much shared in common interest and value and experience. So appreciate you leading the conversation.
Totally. All right. Well, thanks so much. And I'll see you soon.